The moon looks empty from Earth, silent, motionless, untouched. But that silence is misleading, because scattered across its surface are the remains of humanity's first steps beyond our planet. Not ruins buried by time, not artifacts hidden underground. They are still there. The moon preserves everything. There is no wind to erase footprints, no rain to corrode metal, no atmosphere to slowly consume what humans abandoned decades ago. Which means the objects left during the Apollo missions remain almost exactly where astronauts placed them. Flags, boot prints, scientific instruments, rovers, cameras, tools, backpacks, even pieces of spacecraft. Some of those objects have been sitting untouched since 1969. For more than half a century, the moon has silently guarded the evidence of humanity's presence, and most people have no idea how much was actually left behind. During the Apollo program, astronauts carried hundreds of kilograms of equipment to the lunar surface. But bringing everything back was impossible. Weight mattered, fuel mattered. Every kilogram had consequences. So NASA made difficult decisions. Objects were abandoned intentionally, so astronauts could return safely to Earth carrying lunar samples instead. Over time, the moon became something unexpected. Not just a destination, but a frozen archive of human exploration. A place where history was never erased. And today, as humanity prepares to return through the Artemis missions, those forgotten objects are becoming important again, because the moon is not empty anymore. Something remains there, and some of it may survive for millions of years. On Earth, almost nothing lasts forever. Wind erases tracks, water destroys structures, time slowly consumes everything humanity builds. But the moon behaves differently. The footprints left by Apollo astronauts are still there. Every step pressed into the lunar dust remains preserved, because the moon has no weather, no flowing water, and no atmosphere strong enough to disturb the surface. The dust itself is unusual. Lunar soil is made of extremely fine particles created by billions of years of asteroid impacts. Without erosion to smooth them over, those particles stay sharp and compact. When astronauts walked across the surface, their boots compressed the dust into patterns that became almost permanent. Neil Armstrong's first steps may still look almost identical today. The tracks from Apollo 11, Apollo 15, Apollo 16, and Apollo 17 remain scattered across the lunar terrain like silent paths frozen in time. Even rover tire marks still exist. Nothing naturally wipes them away. Only micrometeorite impacts slowly disturb the surface over enormous periods of time. But that process is incredibly slow. Some estimates suggest certain footprints could remain visible for millions of years, which creates a strange realization. Long after cities on Earth disappear, long after buildings collapse, human footprints may still survive on the moon, and the footprints are only the beginning, because astronauts didn't just leave traces behind, they left entire machines, vehicles, experiments, and objects that were never expected to become historical artifacts. The moon became a place where human history stopped moving, a world where the past is still waiting exactly where it was abandoned. The American flags planted during the Apollo missions were never meant to last forever, but they are probably still standing, at least some of them. Between 1969 and 1972, astronauts placed 6 flags on the lunar surface during the Apollo landings. Those flags became symbols of one of humanity's greatest achievements. But the moon is an extremely hostile place for fabric. Temperatures swing violently between extreme heat and extreme cold. Solar radiation constantly bombards the surface, and there is no atmosphere to protect materials from direct exposure. Over decades, scientists believe the colors of the flags may have faded completely under intense ultraviolet radiation. The bright red and blue may now appear almost entirely white. One flag likely fell immediately. Buzz Aldrin reported that the Apollo 11 flag may have been knocked over by the force of the lunar module ascent engine as the crew left the moon, but the others may still be standing today. Orbital images captured by NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter revealed shadows near several Apollo landing sites that strongly suggest upright flags are still present, which means some of those flags have remained untouched for more than 50 years. No wind moves them. No storms tear them apart. They simply stand in silence under a black sky. And around them, the rest of the landing sites remain frozen in time. The descent stages of the lunar modules are still there. Scientific instruments remain exactly where astronauts deployed them. Even discarded equipment still rests on the dust nearby. The Apollo sites are no longer just mission locations. They have become archaeological sites on another world, humanity's first off-world ruins. And one day, future astronauts may walk among them again, not as pioneers, but as visitors returning to places history forgot. The moon is filled with abandoned machines, not broken beyond recognition, not buried underground, still resting openly on the surface. 3 lunar rovers remain there today. Apollo 15, Apollo 16, and Apollo 17 each used electric vehicles designed to travel across the rough lunar terrain. Those rovers transformed lunar exploration. Astronauts could move farther from the landing sites, carry more equipment, and explore areas that would have been impossible on foot. But none of the rovers ever returned to Earth. NASA left them behind intentionally. Each vehicle still sits where astronauts parked it for the final time. Their wheels remain pressed into the dust. Their seats still face the empty horizon. Their cameras still point into silence, and the rovers are only part of what remains. The lower sections of every Apollo lunar module are still standing on the moon. Only the upper ascent stages returned astronauts to orbit. Everything else stayed behind. Metal ladders, landing pads, scientific instruments, storage containers. Even television cameras used to broadcast the moon landings were abandoned there. NASA also left bags of waste material behind to reduce launch weight during departure. The moon became a place where practicality mattered more than preservation. At the time, nobody imagined those objects would become historical treasures. They were simply equipment. Today, their meaning has changed completely, because those machines are no longer just technology. They are evidence, proof that humans reached another world and physically changed its surface. And unlike Earth, the moon refuses to erase the marks we left behind. Everything remains exposed beneath endless sunlight and darkness, waiting, silent, untouched by time in ways that feel almost impossible. For decades, humanity stopped looking at the moon as a destination. After Apollo 17 left the surface in 1972, no human ever returned. The landing sites became isolated relics drifting through time. But now something is changing. The moon is becoming important again. NASA's Artemis program aims to return astronauts to the lunar surface for the first time in more than half a century. Other nations are preparing missions as well. China, India. Private companies, international partnerships. Suddenly the moon is no longer part of history alone. It is becoming the future of space exploration. And that changes the meaning of everything left behind. The old Apollo sites may soon become protected historical zones. Some scientists and historians argue they should be treated like humanity's first extraterrestrial heritage sites. Because once human activity increases again, those untouched areas may not remain preserved forever. New landings could disturb the dust. Rocket exhaust could damage nearby artifacts. Future construction may permanently alter locations that have remained frozen for decades. For the first time, humanity faces a strange question. How do we preserve history on another world? The moon was never designed to become a museum, yet it now contains some of the most important artifacts in human exploration history. And unlike Earth, these objects survived not because they were protected, but because nothing ever touched them again. The silence of the moon preserved everything. But that silence may not last much longer, because humans are preparing to return. And when they do, they may discover something unexpected, not just abandoned machines, but the remains of the moment humanity first crossed into the universe beyond Earth. The moon still carries the marks of humanity's first journey beyond Earth. And perhaps that is what makes it feel so unsettling. Because those objects are not ancient ruins from a forgotten civilization. They belong to us. The footprints on the moon were made by human beings whose voices were recorded, whose missions were broadcast live, whose spacecraft still exist in museums on Earth. Yet part of them remains somewhere else entirely, alone beneath a black sky. There are places on the moon where nothing has moved since the early 1970s. No sound, no motion, no life. Only abandoned objects waiting in absolute silence. And unlike Earth, the moon does not hide the past, it preserves it. Which means future astronauts may someday stand beside the exact footprints left by Apollo crews decades earlier. They may see the faded remains of flags still casting shadows. They may walk past rovers that have not moved for generations. The distance between past and future could disappear completely on the lunar surface. That idea changes the way we see the moon. It is no longer just a celestial object in the night sky. It became humanity's first permanent archive beyond Earth, a frozen memory orbiting our planet. And somewhere up there, beneath layers of dust and endless darkness, the evidence still waits. The moon remembers everything we left behind. Every footprint, every machine, every silent trace of humanity's first attempt to leave Earth forever. And after more than 50 years, something still remains there. Humanity left part of itself on the moon. And after all this time, it is still there. Subscribe to continue exploring the forgotten places, silent machines, and distant worlds humanity left behind across the universe.